Crossover Thursday, so it's Steelers Jaguars week. Leaders of the AFC South, second place team in the AFC North. Big matchup. Chris Carter, Tony Wiggins. Locked on Steelers, Locked on Jaguars. Crossover Thursday. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your hosts, Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, and we're breaking down this upcoming Steelers-Jaguars matchup at Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh, 1 p.m. Sunday Eastern Time. As always, you can find this show and all your shows on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, whether it's on the Steelers or the Jaguars, because we're every day, your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. They sponsor all of our Crossover Thursday episodes, and they're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. As I said before, I'm joined by Tony Wiggins.
That's me.
Locked On Jaguars. Tony, it's been a minute since we've chatted. When was the last time these two teams even played? I'm trying to think back now.
Well, I know the last time I talked to you because I know something that happened, and I know where I was living. And I know I made it hard for myself because we did a whole show and I didn't push record. I don't know if you remember that, bro.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I said, Chris, I called you back and said, Chris, we got to do it again. I didn't record them. That's like 3 years ago or something, man. I said, we ain't gonna make that mistake. You running the show. I'm not going to even. I'm pushing no buttons. I'm just here to talk.
Look, I'm looking on my screen. It says recorded, so we don't get that problem right here. But let's talk about how both of these teams' defenses have been problems for other teams. And Mike Tomlin was so expressive about the Jaguars front. He said they got first rounders across the board, guys who are big, guys who are physical, they get after you. And he talked about Josh Allen and Travon Walker in that duo. The Steelers, of course, have their own duo, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Both of those guys on both teams are wreckers of the game. Mike Tomlin even calling Travon Walker a wrecking ball. Here was Mike Tomlin. I want to play a clip, and then I want to get your insight because there's an interesting debate going on between Jaguars fans right now. But here's Mike Tomlin, Steelers press conference Tuesday, earlier this week, talking about the Jaguars and specifically Allen and Walker.
Now on to Jacksonville. As I mentioned, they're a group, man, that's a winner of 4 straight. Got a lot of respect for that. They got a lot of talent. They got really good sound schematics, and so I'll start with their defense. First, man, we got to do a really good job of managing their bigs. They've invested a lot in their bigs. They got former first rounders, first overall picks in that group. The edge guys really capture your attention. Josh Allen and Walker, in particular, as a tandem, wreak a lot of havoc. I think Josh Allen's got 7 sacks. I think oftentimes sacks don't represent the havoc that Walker causes. I felt that way in an analysis of him leading up to the draft. He's just the type of guy that wrecks a lot of things. He plays with a violent style of play. He's a wrecking ball. And so we just got to be really cognizant of their group and the wave that they provide, the challenges that come with managing their front. They do a really good job schematically of challenging you in terms of putting a lot of guys along the front. They got a 3-4 structure, but boy, those are some big outside linebackers. It's almost like they're doing it with 4-3 people. And it really creates challenges regarding creating space and moving them for running lanes, for example.
So Mike Tomlin went on a lot of things there, but he said that, and I just tweeted that out. Like, Mike Tomlin every week, he talks about the strengths and weaknesses, mainly the strengths of other teams. He doesn't really go over weaknesses as much because he wants to get after those. But he often talks about the best parts of teams, and so he gets really excited to talk about other players that he really appreciates, whether he appreciated them in the NFL draft or he just appreciates them how they play right now. And so I tweeted that out thinking, oh yeah, I'm just gonna say he normally says this, and then that tweet blows up. Yep. And when that went up, blew up, I was like, okay, I guess there's a lot of people excited to hear Mike Tomlin talk about some edge rushers. But then I saw there was a debate going on, and it was a debate between Jaguars fans about Travon Walker because some people were like, see, Mike Tomlin, a Hall of Fame coach, is saying that Travon Walker is going to be awesome. And you guys don't see it. And then there's other people saying he doesn't know it. He's just being nice. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? That guy was a first overall pick. Tony, can you break down what the debate is here about Walker and Allen? Who's good? Why is there such a discrepancy here?
I'm going to give you a word, 2 words, actually. It's a name. It's called Aiden Hutchinson. That's the problem. And the problem is the numbers, the sheer numbers. And then when you watch them both play, one guy does this thing. It's flash to the pass rusher all the time, right?
Yeah.
That the other guy doesn't seem to do. And the guy that doesn't seem to do it is the one that plays for Jacksonville, and that's Travon Walker. So there's 2 things at play. I normally say that, okay, when these coaches look at tape, they're not looking at where a guy was picked. But now we see Tomlin mentioning that he was the first overall pick in the draft. That, to me, was to let the folks who don't cover the team every day know that they've invested a lot of currency into those positions. But what he said was true. He is a wrecking ball. The point is Jaguar fans use the term first overall pick in a monolithic way, as if every draft is the same. So we got Trevor, who's a first overall pick, and then we got him, and then you can look at every first overall pick and try to determine whether or not they're worth it. So the thing that I like to say is you have 2 things at play. You can admit that he's a very, very good player, that he's a wrecking ball. In fact, they want to play very physical. If you pick one person that personifies that physicality and that bully ball, it's him. It's not a binary issue to also say, but that's not what you draft first overall pick for. Like, you don't draft Justin Tuck first overall pick. You don't draft a wrecking ball first overall pick. You draft a guy that can get sacks. You draft Myles Garrett first overall. And that's not who he is, and that's not what he was at Georgia. And I'm glad that Coach Tomlin mentioned that. It's not what he was at Georgia. And right now, it's not what he is here. Now, Coach Tomlin also said something else. He said they got 4-3 people. They run a 3-4, but it looks like they're using 4-3 people. We actually think Travon would be better as a big end in a 4-3, but that's not their system. They drop him in the coverage. They do a lot of mixing and matching. Sometimes he's there to just take on 2 blockers and somebody coming around and looping around is supposed to be set free. They just want him to have system discipline. I asked him straight up, would you sacrifice system discipline and the scheme for sacks? He told me, I'll never do that because I want my job. So I don't know if he likes what he's doing, but he's not the type of person to bellyache about it. They play a lot differently than Pittsburgh does, where their guys do get sacks. But the Jaguars defense is leading this team. So it's an oxymoron to say, well, we need more, but then to look up and they're 5-2, and everybody knows the defense is carried to that point so far.
You brought up a name that a lot of Steelers fans are going to be like, when you said Myles Garrett, because anytime TJ Watt, he can get 3 sacks in a game while Myles Garrett gets none, and PFF will grade him as a better player. Right now, TJ Watt, still that very much that record, even when in a game plan like last week, he didn't get any sacks. It wasn't because he wasn't good. It was because the Rams were doing everything they were sending 3-4 guys out to make sure him and Alex Highsmith would not get to Matt Stafford, max protect or quick passes to make sure that he wasn't in the game. And yet somehow he still found a way to get in the game by dropping back and intercepting a pass to Cooper Kupp.
Those guys are fabulous. I mean, both of them, as well as Nick Bosa. The only reason I mentioned Myles Garrett, I forgot I was talking to Steelers. The only reason I mentioned him is because he's
the first overall pick.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's somebody they can go, boom, that's what we wanted. But
yes,
all drafts aren't the same, man. Some of them have franchise quarterbacks at the top. Some of them don't. And when the Jaguars, they weren't going to take Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson doesn't fit what they do. He does not fit what they do. And they wouldn't have the same you wouldn't have heard Mike Tomlin say that about Aiden Hutchinson. He'd probably talk nice about him, but he wouldn't say that. He'd say something else. So that thing that Mike Tomlin said is exactly what the Jaguars coaching staff wants, and he sounds a lot like the Jaguars coaching staff when you ask them about Travon Walker. They sound just like that.
I mean, also the Jaguars coaching staff right now is, I think, pretty good. Doug Peterson, I've always had a great appreciation for. I think he's a very good to great coach, and he's got the Jaguars playing really well right now. Won 4 in a row. They're playing at a high level. The Steelers are trying to get to that point. They're trying to build consistency. But the one consistent part is their outside linebackers, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. And Alex Highsmith, he's very much just like that. He's built like a D end, but he plays outside linebacker. the Steelers are happy to have those type of guys in their defense. And I think there's that similarity that you see with the Jaguars, and they're like, ooh, we can that's what makes this could be really fun, because both these teams, they practice against those guys. Like, all training camp, the Jaguars offensive line, they've had to deal with both of those guys. All training camp, the Steelers have to deal with Highsmith and Watt. Now it's going to be interesting to see which of those groups of edge rushers take over this game first, and that's going to be something definitely to watch. But we also want to watch the young quarterbacks. We'll talk about the young quarterbacks here on the other side of the first break of the Crossover Thursday episode. Locked On Steelers, Locked On Jaguars. Chris Carter, Tony Wiggins, stick with us. We still have so much to discuss here on Crossover Thursday. But first, we'll remind you this show is brought to you by DoorDash. Why root for your favorite team on an empty stomach? You can order on DoorDash and save on football watch party favorites. Whether you're ordering pizza, wings, soda, burgers, or even just buns on DoorDash, you can get all delivered without missing the game. For me, I like to order up some Big Shot Bob's for wings delivery. And if you're from Pittsburgh, you're in Pittsburgh, you ever been to Pittsburgh, and you know what I'm talking about when you get Big Shot Bob's. They got like 30, 50, 100 flavors that you can go through. I like to get me some Frank White flavor wings right ready for you. Or if you just want to go with a classic Pittsburgh, you go to Permani's, get a sirloin steak and cheese sandwich, all that and more available on DoorDash. And if you're in Jacksonville, it's the same thing. You can get stuff specialized, your favorite stuff delivered right to your door on DoorDash. And right now, get 50% off up to $10 of value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23, subject to change. Terms apply. Want even more value? You can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a DashPass membership. Get prepared before today. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win. Get 50% off your first DoorDash when you go over a $10 value, and when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23, all one word, subject to change. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Crossover Thursday in the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Jaguars, teaming up here to give you our analysis on this upcoming Steelers-Jaguars matchup. Let's talk about the quarterbacks here, Tony, because both franchises, I think, really love their quarterbacks right now. Now, the Jaguars a little further ahead. Trevor Lawrence in his third year, and looking really good. Had a really good season last year, a sophomore season, bouncing back from the Urban Meyer year, really strong. Got them a playoff win, looked pretty solid there. Kenny Pickett is at a point where I think he could be on the cusp of turning the page from his rookie struggles and figuring some things out. He had a fantastic finish, leading 3 touchdown drives in the second half against the Rams. Also closed the game out with a 4-minute drive to get the close out there. That came off of a fourth quarter comeback against the Ravens. He now has 6 game-winning drives in 18 starts. 5 of those fourth quarter comebacks in his time as a Steeler. But I think it's an interesting parallel. When we here in Pittsburgh, we're talking about what you want to see from Kenny Pickett this year. A lot of people just say, you want to see what Trevor Lawrence did for the Jaguars last year. Tony, can you enlighten people? What has Trevor Lawrence's journey been last year? What it took for him to get to the point where everyone kind of agreed that he had taken a real step up, maybe his struggles to get there, and where he's at this year?
Coaching. He had to get some real coaching, man. He had to get away from Urban Meyer. We'll get Urban Meyer away from this organization because shout out to the coaches that were here, the assistants, but they weren't allowed to do very much. And then It was just always a lot of Trevor spent a lot of time in front of the microphone being a press secretary and kind of calming the natives because everyone was so happy that he was here. But the first year he actually had to really just be around his teammates, play football, be a 24-year-old kid who a 23 or 24-year-old kid was last year, where he needs to be ingratiated within the team itself and be closer to the team than he is to the coach, and not be out here being marched in front of a podium just to calm down the natives and the fans of Jacksonville. So what he's really done is Doug Peterson put a lot on his plate. And at first it seemed like it was a little bit much. And when asked last year, was he going to pull some off? He said no. And I like that, because when you have a guy with that much talent, that kind of talent likes to be fed and likes to be challenged. And that's what they did. And he accepted that challenge. And at some point last year, about midway through the season, you always saw the special throws, but then you started to see the command. And then you started to see his ability to boost his teammates. And they never thought that they were ever out of a game, thus winning all of those games down the stretch, winning 7 out of 9 down the stretch, coming back from a 27-0 deficit in the playoffs where Trevor threw 4 picks in the first half. And I sat in the press box and said, all they got to do is stop shooting themselves in the foot and they can come back. And that's exactly what they did. So what's happened is all of the things you want him to do as a quarterback, he's doing them, and the intangibles have started to match that big arm and that talent.
I think that's where the Steelers are hoping Kenny Pickett gets to, because early in his career, he threw early in his rookie season. He's still very early in his career, of course, second year as a player, but he threw a lot of interceptions to start, and he threw a few interceptions early on this season too. But when he starts to figure things out and sharpen up, you see him make less of those mistakes, less of those interceptable balls, giving his guys more of a chance. And that's what the Steelers are trying to find, consistency. And we talked to Kenny Pickett on Wednesday in the Steelers locker room. I didn't get a chance to clip this up beforehand, but he talked about how he feels like there's bread and butter things developing for the Steelers offense. And that's been the biggest thing, is trying to find the bread and butter and then build off of that, things that are concepts that are familiar to them, using the pre-snap motion like they have to open up more opportunities for guys that they really like in Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. And I think that's another thing here. Both quarterbacks have first-round running backs and then 2 receivers that each, you could say, could be a number 1 receiver in their own right. Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley for the Jaguars, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens for the Steelers. Where is the Jaguars offensive line right now? Are they a very confident group? Are they a top 10 group? Are they a middling group? What kind of group is this in front of Trevor Lawrence?
Well, they're not a top 10 group, but they have stretches where they are challenged, especially at the end of the game. You know, you can't beat who you can't block. And for the Jaguars to make all of those comebacks, they had to be blocking people at the end of the game. The Cowboys, the Chargers, those are games that they actually won where they were losing. And those teams have great pass rushers. So where they are right now is they're not 100% healthy, because Walker Little, even though they're working him back in this week, I don't know if he's going to play or not at the time that we recorded this, but he's played mostly left tackle while Cam Robinson was out early in the year, and then he moved over to left guard, and he didn't even complete the game. He got injured. But they have a right tackle who they chose at the end of the first round, Anton Harrison. This is the week where you chip. They did not do that against the Chiefs when the Chiefs moved Chris Jones out to defensive end, and that was a mistake because Jones set loose for 2.5 sacks. They got to make sure this opponent, and then they go on the bye and they come back and they play the 49ers. And that kid is facing the two of the 3 guys we've already mentioned. He's facing TJ Watt, and then he's going to face Nick Bosa. They better learn to chip or get the ball out of his hand real quick, because it's going to be a long day. But the rookie's fighting. He's just a rookie.
The Steelers also have a rookie tackle in Roderick Jones, but he's not starting right now. And it's not about him lacking anything. The Steelers really like their veteran left tackle right now, Dan Moore Jr., who struggled to start the year. And I even questioned going in here because he was injured. Broderick Jones came in and started against the Ravens. I thought played very well against the Ravens, shut down Jadeveon Clowney. And then after the bye week, Dan Moore Jr. came back, and I was like, man, why is he starting? But then he had a really good game, and the Steelers' offensive line was getting pushed, and they limited Aaron Donald. He had 4 tackles, but he never got a sack. Only had like 1 or 2 pressures maybe in the game. And if you're limiting Aaron Donald there, you're doing a good job. That's one of those elite type players, and they moved him all around to challenge basically every Steelers offensive lineman at one point. I think that both of these quarterbacks are in positions where their offensive lines have ups and downs, are very inconsistent, but have the potential to coalesce to become good. They both have multiple number 1 type talents at wide receiver. They both have first round talent running backs to work with. And I think this is going to be an interesting duel because, again, you're also facing 2 edge rushers on the other side, on the other side of each other that are very talented, athletic, and are going to get after you. This matchup may be a mirror match in so many different ways. And I think that's what gets me kind of excited just thinking about this and all the things and way these teams could collide. They could be attacking each other in such similar ways. And this might be able to see like, hey, where is Lawrence to Pickett as far as Pickett's development in his second year and Lawrence's development in his third year?
Yeah, you're right about that. And that's a good thing with the quarterbacks. The thing when you talk about those two players, the one thing that I will bring up is draft status and where you were picked once the games have started to be played. It doesn't matter anymore. But I went back and forth with Richard Sherman during the Thursday night game with the Saints, and Sherman basically had said that Trevor so far hadn't lived up to expectations. Let me give you the stats between 2022 and 2023.
Okay.
Trevor Lawrence, last year in 22, 66% of his passes completed. This year, 67. So we guessed that it's about 66.7 or something like that. But he has 5,700 yards passing, 43 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. I mean, in the last 2 years, if that's not living up to being an NFL quarterback and to being a generational franchise quarterback, I don't know what it is. So I think a lot of times, because of the way he was picked, he's looked at in a different light than other guys like Justin Herbert. Everybody has this Justin Herbert love fest. Go look at the numbers. Justin Herbert's numbers nowhere near as good as Trevor Lawrence. And his performance in these big games aren't either. So I think a little bit of that plays into effect. I like Kenny, though. I like Kenny because I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He was the guy that Jim Nagy and everyone were talking about at the Senior Bowl. And it's good to see him finally living up to it.
I look at guys often and seeing how they compare in a lot of things. And one thing that I think Kenny Pickett has on his side before we move on to other matchups we want to talk about in this game, but one thing I think that Kenny Pickett has definitely shown is he has the swagger at the end of the game. You know, I talked about this, in fact, on yesterday's episode of Locked On Steelers, but go look at his fourth quarter numbers. Go look at his quarter by quarter numbers. In fact, if you just want to look at Kenny Pickett and see where he kind of builds up, and you can look at his splits quarter by quarter, he increases pretty drastically, and not even steadily, but drastically. If you look at his first quarter numbers, he has a passer rating that is insane at like 40. He has a passer rating of 45.8. Abysmal. Would be worst in the NFL if that was his whole passer rating. Second quarter, it jumps up to 76.8. Still not good. Still bottom of the league. Then all of a sudden in the third quarter, it's 92.9. And then you're like, well, that's kind of up there with some of the better quarterbacks. And then in the fourth quarter, his pass rating jumps up to 102.8. And it's like he's Patrick Mahomes in the fourth quarter. And it's crazy. And I think that is a sign. And I talked about this more on Wednesday, but I think that is a sign that when he develops consistency and rhythm with this offense that can occur more regularly and more routinely, you'll probably see more of those good things take over more parts of his games and early on. And I think that's what all young quarterbacks are going through. I think Trevor Lawrence, it wasn't the same exact thing, but I think Trevor Lawrence in a similar way, he just needed to find rhythm in his offense, especially when Doug Peterson took over. It wasn't just immediately he came in and bam, the whole offense was great and awesome and everyone was clicking. It took time to understand this new offense, his players, develop rhythm with guys. And you're seeing that this year. And this year he has that feel and they're off and running. I think that's where the Steelers want Kenny Pickett to be this time next year. But right now, after the way that he played against the Rams, a lot of Steelers fans are hoping you see more of a glimpse of that than just the fourth quarter against the Jaguars. We'll talk more about these teams and key matchups of this game on the other side of this break here on Crossover Thursday here in the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Steelers, Locked On Jaguars, Chris Carter, Tony Wiggins. Still so much to talk about. Stick with us right here. But first, before we do anything else, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. As the NFL season continues, they give you incredible offers on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, including right now, new customers can bet just $5 and they'll get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That means win or lose on your first $5 bet on FanDuel, you're getting $200 back in bonus bets. And those are bonus bets that can be used for player props, who's going to win, money lines, all those kind of bets available to you on FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will also get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and to enjoy your NFL season to the max with FanDuel Sportsbook, the best sportsbook in America and the official partner of the NFL. We're also brought to you by Jase Medical. Jase Medical offers you the Jase Case, which provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase Case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions doctor created, doctor recommended. Don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected, and especially in our times when emergencies, you never know when they're going to come up. There might be a situation that you could have never expected in your life, and those times those happen to us, to all of us. But you want to be prepared, and Jase wants you to be prepared too. That's why they're offering you the Jase Case. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jase Medical is simple. You go online, fill out a form, and then you get prescription life-saving medications right to your door. The Jase Case gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have that medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting those life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using our code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, at checkout on jasemedical.com, and that's JASE medical.com. Back here on Crossover Thursday in the Locked On Podcast Network, Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars. All right, Tony, we've talked about a lot of similarities in this team. I'll tell you one part of, let's go over some strengths and weaknesses of these matchups. I don't want to get into predictions because I save that for our Friday episodes.
No problem.
That's when we get there. But let's talk about things we can expect here. The Steelers, one thing in their defense, they haven't stopped the run consistently. And their cornerbacks have been, outside of Joey Porter Jr., who's been lights out in the times that he's played for the Steelers, they've been kind of suspect. Patrick Peterson played better last week, moving into the slot a little bit more and helping out in those spots, but Levi Wallace hasn't been great. And so there are concerns, and I think legitimate concerns for this Steelers team, if TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith don't take over, that Travis Etienne, the way that he's been running this year, and Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, they start getting busy. This could be the perfect storm that gets in the way of the Steelers and causes too many problems for this defense. How have you seen this Jaguars offense find its consistency? What's the thing that gets Travis Etienne going? Is he a consistent factor, or is he kind of just his speed, it just pops up out of nowhere sometimes?
Yes, both. He does both. Yeah, he's more patient this year. He runs behind his pads. He hasn't put the ball on the ground. He used to look like he was running behind his legs, and every time he got hit, it looked like he was falling off of a bike or something. You know what I'm saying? Well, now he doesn't take those big hits, and those hits don't look crazy anymore, because I think when he knows the play is done, he knows it's done. But then he's a guy that on his 24th carry will pop one, and he can hurt you in the passing game. So I suspect between him and Evan Ingram that Minkah Fitzpatrick will be very, very busy, because that little short area that belongs to him in the flat, and guarding tight ends as well as running backs. But yeah, Etienne can hurt you, and the fact that your guys' weaknesses line up with the Jags having really, really good, quick, fast, twitchy receivers that all turn into punt returners after they catch the ball, and with Travis Etienne, that's a very, very scary prospect to have. One of the things that I'm going to be watching for, though, with you guys is the commitment to Najee. Will they commit to running the ball? If the Jaguars don't pull away from them, then you can't. If the Jaguars pull away, you can't commit too much to the run. If they don't, I think Harris, the Jaguars have these little lulls on defense. It's not one drive. It's usually like 10 minutes, 10 game clock minutes, where they have to find themselves again. What happens in that little stretch with the Steelers will determine, in my opinion, whether or not they win this game or not.
Right now, the Jaguars, as I look at them, they're giving up the 31st most passing yards in the NFL, but they're giving up the fourth. They're giving up the 31st least. So they're 31st in pass defense. I said that the wrong way, but they're fourth in run defense. Is that Travon Walker and Josh Allen just crushing things up front that has created that? What's been the source of their success on the run defense?
A group effort from everyone involved, and then better play from Devin Lloyd, who was a first round pick.
I really like Devin Lloyd coming out of college.
Yeah, he's in the same draft as Trayvon. He gets it. It's slowed down for him now. He was always physical, could always run, but now he knows exactly what he's supposed to do He doesn't let guys run across his face unchecked. He triggers down to where he's supposed to be, and he doesn't miss tackles. So it's a combination. They don't even have their best interior player, Devon Hamilton. I don't know if he's going to play. He's been out for a while. He hasn't played all season, but he's back practicing. Once they get him in the fold, they're really, really going to be dangerous. But right now, it's a group effort. It's 7, 8 defensive linemen all doing what they're supposed to do. The Jags have also been able to turn people over a lot. And a lot of those teams get desperate because they get behind and they try to start throwing the football. So the stats don't tell the whole story with that. I know they're 31st, but covering people hasn't really seemed like a problem watching the game. It just seems like that's just the ebb and the flow of the football game. And eventually teams just start throwing.
I mean, the Jaguars, they've been a tough team. They're 5-2. So I mean, I get that, and that's the thing. They also have the 32nd. They're dead last. They've been more teams have thrown at them than anyone else in the NFL. And part of that is when you're ahead, people throw on you more. So that could very much be part of it. I believe it's net yards per attempt. Right now they're 22nd, so that just kind of shows it's not about them being the worst passing defense. It's just that they're just being thrown on a lot because they kind of have to, and that makes me wonder if there's something to attack in this Jaguars defense for Kenny Pickett in this offense. What is it, Tony?
I try to go after the third corner, the nickel. Trey Herndon is who it is right now. Tyson Campbell's out, so they've been going with Monteric Buster Brown, a second-year player out of Arkansas, opposite Darius Williams. Darius Williams has been lights out. That is not where you want to hang out. Don't even go over there and bother with him because he did a real good job on Stephon Diggs when they were in London, and he has been picking people off left and right. He has a Super Bowl ring. He knows what pressure is because he played opposite Jalen Ramsey, and nobody wanted to throw at Ramsey in L.A. But the key is to try to attack him in the nickel spot when they have that third corner in the game. And also, they've had a little bit of problem. As good as they have been against the rush, sometimes they forget to set the edge because they do a lot of twisting. And if you can catch them in one of those situations where they don't set the edge, you can make sure that you can probably do a little bit of damage there. But you got to line it up when they're in that funk. Like I said, you got to line it up when the switch is off a little bit, because once they turn it on and they get it figured out, they're good to go.
I hear you on that. I can tell you the Steelers offense with Najee Harris, they're trying to find different ways to get him outside to attack those parts of the defenses, but he's been more successful when he runs in between the tackles. That's like usually when he gets, but they're starting to do these pitches where they line up in the shotgun and he just and Najee Harris just immediately he just goes lateral. The Steelers offensive line, they have one guy pull out in front of it, and Pickett just pitches it to him, and he just goes. And it's not about it doesn't take as long to the traditional toss where he winds up in a single back and he goes out wide and all that. He's just get it to him, let him go forward. I think that's what the Steelers are going to try to do. So if they get out there wide, that could be interesting here. I think that this could be a very interesting receiver cornerback battle on both sides here because you talked about Williams. Does he take the number one receiver, or does he take a certain side of the field?
No, he plays the side. He's on the left side, so for the most part, he'll be lined up on if the defense is facing Kenny Pickett, he'll be to Kenny Pickett's right most of the time. And we'll just have to see if they decide to roll coverages, but they've been pretty steadfast with the way that they play, and they've just been trying to tell their guys just to execute how they play. So I think it's going to be extremely interesting, extremely fun. But like you said, none of this works if the line of scrimmage it breaks down, and that's going to be the key. The key is going to be the line of scrimmage and who commits the most turnovers or who forces the most turnovers. And I think that'll be the difference in the game.
Certainly is. One thing I said about the Steelers-Rams game was that the team that changed the line of scrimmage more often was going to win that game. The Steelers ended up doing that, and they ended up winning that game. Though they didn't sack Matt Stafford all the time, they were able to push the line a little bit, disrupt his rhythm, and get things going here. I think a similar thing happens in this game where it's going to be about which quarterback gets disrupted, more in this game. Both teams have also playmaking safeties. Andre Cisco out of Syracuse, I covered him when he played against Pitt a few times in the ACC. So Minkah Fitzpatrick, he doesn't need any introductions. Everyone knows how good that guy is. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. We still got a lot to talk about on our Friday episodes here in the Locked On Podcast Network. It's crossover Thursday here. Locked On Steelers, Locked On Jaguars. Chris Carter, Tony Wiggins. Tony, it's always great to do a show with you, man. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Shop Talking Wig on X, as it's called right now. Just look up Tony Wiggins, and I'm there every single day, just like Locked On, because it's your team every day.
Exactly. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and find me here on the Locked On Podcast Network talking on Locked On Steelers, just like Tony talks on Locked On Jaguars, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thanks again, everybody. Tune in to Jaguars fans. Tune in to Locked On Jaguars on Friday. Steelers fans, tune in to Locked On Steelers on Friday. We got a lot to break down to finalize this matchup and with our predictions. We'll see you there right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.